Hello and welcome to Connotation Points video Snark. I'm making my way through Born at Midnight by CC Hunter. If you haven't seen the other videos, you might want to do that before jumping into this one or else you might be confused. Link will be posted below. Chapter 28. The email Kylie's mom sent verified that her parents weren't supernaturals. Kylie jumps to a weird conclusion that this must mean that she's not a supernatural, even though Holiday literally will not stop repeating that it sometimes skips a couple of generations. Miranda even brings this up too. However, Kylie is so eager to cling on to literally any hope that there's nothing wrong with her that she's like, no, you're wrong. Nobody in my family is a supernatural. Della, however, seems to think that Kylie's mom is lying, which is a really weird thing to lie about. This leads to a weird conversation about why Kylie's parents are getting a divorce. Kylie seems to think that her mom is cold and unfeeling. However, Della is convinced of the following. Believe me, if he accused your mom of being a popsicle, he's found some young, warm thing to screw. The next morning, Kylie presents the email to Holiday as proof that she should be allowed to return home. And do they have printers now too? Well, I guess then it makes sense if they set up computers to also have some printers. However, as you probably already guessed, Holiday isn't convinced. The generational skipping might be rare, but the fact remains that Kylie can still see ghosts, and I doubt that she was bitten by radioactive ghosts in this situation. Holiday also suggests that Kylie could be adopted. Kylie is quick to counter this, not with, but I look like X family member, but I saw a picture of my mom when she was pregnant, which doesn't exactly prove anything. How do you know that that baby was you? Just when I'm starting to wonder if this book has taken a hard right into unlawful restraint by forcing Kylie to remain at the camp, Holiday asks if Kylie actually wants to be at the camp or not. Kylie is uncertain and expresses how isolated that she feels. The vampires hang out with other vampires, the fairies with other fairies, but who can Kylie hang out with? Although nobody outside of Frederica has been unwelcoming towards her, she still feels out of place. Holiday encourages Kylie to give it a fortnight for her to reach some conclusion other than "I'm mentally unwell," and if at that time Kylie still wants to leave, then Holiday will call Kylie's mom herself. That being settled, Holiday then switches tracks to talk about ghosts. She says that it always starts with one, but more will be sure to follow. She also says that the night terrors are probably a sign of ghosts trying to get in contact with her. Holiday goes on to say that there's a sort of off switch Kylie can use to turn her ghost communicating powers off. But it's not as simple as turning off a light switch. Furthermore, she explains that a powerful ghost will be able to turn Kylie's powers back on if it's that desperate for attention. Some time passes. Kylie tries to convince Ella and Miranda to go down and see the waterfall with the Death Angels, but they're too afraid to go, so Kylie decides to let that go. And she talks nonstop with her mom, which makes her think that her mom actually does care, which seems like a weird way of showing it if you ask me. The mom did send Kylie to a therapist, which is a good first step, but I'm still of the opinion that a lot of Kylie's issues stem from her mother being emotionally neglectful towards her daughter, and shipping her off to a camp probably was a super awful move. Talking to your daughter twice a day on the phone isn't somehow going to make up for all of the poor parenting choices up until this point. Kylie also can't help but note that she hasn't heard from her father once. The only hope that she clings to is that he'll be there for the parents' weekend, although judging by the way that he's been shown to act, it wouldn't surprise me if he were a no-show. And then Sarah, if anybody actually cares about that. She's apparently forgotten the horror of thinking that she was pregnant and plans to be intimate with her newest boyfriend, somebody who is 19 years old. And nope, I'm not touching that one. Not right now. Goodbye. And Trey continues to harass Kylie over everything, which only just puts Kylie into a weird position of comparing Trey and Derek. Meanwhile, Holiday has Kylie trying to meditate in order to find that off switch for her powers. For example, learning how to meditate, trying to get to the off switch to cut off the ghost was turning into an all-time dreaded chore. Holiday had her hitting the mat 3 times a day. They tried burning incense, counting, music, and even visualization, but nothing seemed to help. Kylie's mind refused to find an altered state of any kind. Holiday stayed forever hopeful, Kylie not so much. "It will happen, I promise," Holiday would say after each failed session. That's not really how meditation works, but sure. Kylie seems to think that her failure to meditate properly is further proof that she's not a supernatural, but I don't know what meditation has to do with being a medium. Anyway, the hour-long meet with other campers via randomized drawing is still going on. Kylie is worried that she'll end up being paired with Frederico or Lucas, but that hasn't happened so far, which means that it probably will at some point, right? One morning, Kylie is sitting with Dylan and Miranda and watching as the other campers draw names for the day. She thinks about how both of her roommates have crushes on two other guys, although I'm of the mind to cry out, "Nobody cares!" Derek comes over and distracts Kylie with a bandage over his arm because the vampire took some of his blood, even though it's been 4 days following that, but here we are. Just then a girl calls out that she got partnered with Derek for the day. She walks over to him and kisses him. Kylie can't help but note that Derek gives the other girl the same kind of look he had previously given Kylie. And just when I didn't think that my opinion of Derek could possibly get lower, he does this. Either he's a playboy or he's doing this to get a rise out of Kylie. Either way, it's a horrible thing to do, and I would like very much to hit him with a shovel. Kylie tries to tell herself that she's not feeling jealous over this, and this was the reason why she didn't want to get involved with Derek, because people are awful and they'll only just hurt you. Just then, Miranda says that somebody drew Kylie's name while she was distracted by Derek being awful again. And let me guess, it's gonna be Lucas, isn't it? Chapter 29. Much to my surprise, the person who ends up pulling Kylie's name is Perry. I'm so shocked that it wasn't Lucas that I almost fell out of my chair. And then the story jumps to the next day after that quarter of a page. Talk about bad writing. There was literally no reason for that not to have been included in the previous chapter, except the author's insane and stupid insistence on including a cliffhanger for literally every single chapter. Although I'm not quite sure if skipping over what I'm sure was going to be another tedious conversation redone with Perry instead of insert whatever actual love interest here was a good thing or a bad thing. So now Kylie is waiting for her dad to show up for Parents' Weekend, and then the book insists on taking us back to Kylie's conversation with Perry anyway. Book editors, who needs them? We can just slam whatever words that pop into our mind into any order. Coherent timelines are for squares. Kylie had taken Perry to the rock where she and Derek had their conversation in the hopes of catching Derek and the other girl making out or something, but they weren't there, so Kylie took him a little past that and they had their conversation, which is mercifully not described in any way, shape, or form. Derek approaches Kylie as she waits for her dad. She says that her mom isn't coming. She also has a plan of leaving the camp with her dad when he actually bothers to show up, and let's just say that right now I don't have a lot of hope on her dad actually making an appearance. Derek says that he's waiting for his mom and goes on to explain that she's been overprotective of him since his dad left. He spots her and leaves. Kylie has some regrets over having asked Derek to only be friends, but also tells herself that it's probably better this way. Kylie's dad continues not to arrive, and she sits and watches as the other parents circle in. Those people are clearly Della's parents, because Della is clearly the only mixed-race Asian white person in the entire camp of hundreds of children. Whee! Casual racism! Della isn't there, so Kylie goes over to talk to them. They are also under the impression that this is a camp for delinquents and complain that Della is still asleep. However, as I kept guessing, Kylie's dad ends up being a no-show. Eventually, Holiday comes over to talk to her. Kylie brushes it off like, ha ha ha, men, am I right? Although I'm not sure that she's convincing even herself. She then tries to change the subject and asks if Holiday has a man in her life. Holiday then confesses that she has a fiancé and that they were getting close to their wedding, but then there was some other woman, and I'm sure that you know how that goes. They then shift the conversation to Della and her difficult situation. Holiday says that no matter what Della picks, it's going to be hard for her. Lucas comes into the room with his grandmother. Holiday explains that his parents were both killed shortly after Lucas was born, so he was raised by his grandparents. Kylie seems to think that this has something to do with the rumors that he's a rogue, but doesn't say this out loud. Then one of the FRU guys shows up, so Holiday leaves to go deal with him. An hour later, Kylie's dad still hasn't shown up, so she calls him and he gives a what's thinner and more fragile than what rice paper, because at this point that's her dad's constant excuses. It's all Kylie can do not to burst out crying in the middle of the room full of not only her peers but also her parents. She runs back to her room but knows that Soldier Dude is following her. She screams at him to go away as the chapter ends. And here's hoping that she actually has to deal with Soldier Dude in the next chapter. But knowing my luck, he'll vanish after like 3 paragraphs and then she'll go eat dinner or something stupid and boring. Chapter 30. The next morning, Kylie is surprised to see that Della is up so early. She thinks about how dour the mood was in the cabin the night before. And then we jump back to Soldier Dude's reappearance the day before. Because I knew not to get my hopes up, and the only thing she says about it is that she really hopes that something about those endless meditation sessions would have proved helpful, and then that's literally it. Back to Della's awful parents. Della apologizes for her dad's awful behavior towards Kylie the day before. However, Kylie says that she wasn't awful towards her, but feels like he owes an apology to his daughter instead. But in Kylie's mind, even terrible behavior is better than her own father, who acted like he'd never heard of this parents' weekend when she called him. Her mom would have had a fit if Kylie had told her about his no-show. Yeah, and somebody needs to give him a kick in the keister. He's not being a very good parent. Della mentions that she thinks that Kylie has an email from her dad, but Kylie refuses to check, which is probably for the best right now. They go outside where Miranda says that she thinks that there's a baby bird who fell out of the nest and hurt itself. However, after Kylie watches as the eyes shift from blue to black, she and Della both agree that it would be best if Miranda snapped the bird's neck. Miranda thinks that they're being mean until Kylie makes a reference to the Perry kitten incident, and then she's quick to drop the bird as it transforms back into Perry. And honestly, this boy's about 2 seconds away from actually having his neck snapped. After Perry leaves, Kylie and Della tease Miranda over how obvious it is that Perry likes her, although I feel like there's a line between, hey, I like you, and I'm going to break into your room and steal your underwear. For Perry, that line is so far behind him, I don't think that he can see it anymore. They go on and seem to think that Perry's behavior is along the same lines as when the boy pulls on a girl's ponytail, it must mean that he likes her, which, nope. Also not going to go there. That's awful behavior, and shame on you for even offhandedly implying that this is in any way romantic. They continue to tease Miranda for a moment until Kylie suddenly mentions that she's going to be going home in 2 weeks. However, Della is quick to call Kylie out on her nonsense and says that Kylie just doesn't want to be supernatural. Della storms off in a huff, and Miranda says that she's angry at Kylie too. In the dining hall, Kylie ends up sitting at the table by herself. There's a moment when she's certain that Derek is going to come in and sit with her, but he ignores her and goes to sit with the chick from earlier. She then hears Della start to get into it with another vampire. Just as Kylie decides to go help her friend, Della storms out. Kylie follows after, only to find no Della and the other campers drawing names for their meet and greet thing. She also thinks about her non-conversation with Soldier Dude the night before. Because, forget actually telling us what happened. Nope, I enjoy reading things secondhand like this. She seems to think that her telling Soldier Dude to piss off is only just making him even more determined to talk to her. Kylie goes over to Miranda, who says that she doesn't know what Della was fighting with the other vampire about, because now Della is apparently also fighting with Miranda, even though Della is angry at Kylie. Just then, because we all knew that it was coming, Lucas says that he drew Kylie's name. Kylie is ready with some rehearsed excuses, but she doesn't actually say anything. He suggests that since she seemed interested in the dinosaur tracks from several chapters earlier, he knows where they can go look at some more. So they just kind of go. And as they're walking along, Kylie's like, Lucas isn't so bad. She thinks that it's because she's been at camp with so many of them that Lucas no longer stands out half as much as he used to. Kylie brings up Frederica, although Lucas denies that she's his girlfriend. Kylie brings up having caught them making out behind the office, although, again, Lucas says that they weren't doing that. He insists that she was just showing him a tattoo that she got, which, wow, is that seriously the best that you could come up with? He goes on to say that he hooked up with her at the end of camp last year. He says that it was never anything other than a full moon hookup, and that they weren't really anything to each other. But now Frederica is going around and acting like the two of them are married, and it's really starting to piss Lucas off. However, rather than to actually tell Frederica that he isn't interested in her like that, he's just, not really doing anything about the situation, which is probably just making it worse, let's be honest. However, Kylie thinks that he's lying, and also lying about how he was raised by his grandparents, and seems to think that when he spoke with her about the FRU, he was simply trying to make sure that Kylie hadn't tattled on him to them. And then Kylie suddenly gets super nervous because she still isn't sure that she can trust Lucas, and they're walking awfully deep into the woods right now, far enough away that she's certain that not even vampires will be able to hear her scream. Thanks for listening to my Book Snark on YouTube. If you enjoy my videos, please hit that subscribe button. I post a new Snark video every Monday. Please don't forget to check out my other Snark of Stalking Jack the Ripper and The Plan. If you've already seen those, then you can head over to Tumblr for my main book Snarks. And if all of that is somehow still not enough for you, then you can become my Patreon supporter for just $1 a month and read a bunch of bonus Snarks that aren't up anywhere else. See you next week, guys.